guys, Jamie here. Firstly, I'm going to apologise for all the delays in the steampunk tutorials. I did recently have to take on a job which was meant to only be 25 hours a week, and every single day that I worked, and it's a hard physical job, they wanted me to do, instead of a 5-hour shift, a 10-hour to 12-hour shift with no breaks. Obviously, I've put my foot down about that and am switching to 3 days a week, because if you want me to work silly hours, I can only do it 3 days a week and fulfill my commitment to you guys. Meanwhile, we have a tutorial. I did an open tutorial on creating clusters. I will link that below, and that involved making your own background papers, which I have used in this little recycled from cardboard boxes, just flippy kind of steampunk journal. I've also used the Scrabble letters. I haven't attempted to get high scoring words like everyone else, and you'll see that in this there are still some junk journal elements. For example, a handmade envelope, we've got a pocket, a flip page and a tuck spot. So even though it is small, it has had a lot of work go into it. Handmade papers, clusters, collaging, and also the little extras that you would expect to find in a junk journal just for fun. That video is coming up basically now. However, the microphone port on my phone is no longer working. As soon as I can afford to replace my phone, I will, so that I can use a microphone again. In the meanwhile, it does mean there will be a change in sound quality when I go to the pre-recorded bit of this video. Be prepared for that. Now all the pieces are prepared, we need to put them together. For this, I'm going to use a very heavy gel medium because I've got thick cardboard pieces and clusters. Therefore, I want something strong enough. As explained in the group video, I have cut everything to size in prep and inked the edges with Vintage Photo. You can see that I've also inked the ridges of the cleaned up cardboard, as well as the digital papers and fussy cuts. In this part of the video, you can see me just playing to decide how I'm going to layer things together. I have cut the digital paper slightly smaller than the hand printed paper, and I'm going to start matting and layering these together. I always struggle with any glue to get everything to adhere properly. One thing that does help is using a piece of plastic as a smoothing tool, pushing the glue to the edges and using a bit of pressure to try and get a good adhesion. From one of the Art Tribe videos, I also have some offcuts of some acrylic paint printed or mark making papers that I'm also going to use in this project. I do like using offcuts and scraps, not only to avoid throwing too much into the recycling, but also it gives a unique look to a project even when using printables. I find you can mix and match almost any papers together as long as your focus points are within the theme that you're looking at, which is why I have prepped so many fussy cuts and the Scrabble letters. Talking about the Scrabble letters, I have added the word Clockworks off camera. I'm not entering the Scrabble competition. And now I'm covering with a coat of the matte medium to make sure everything is fully down on this background piece. I think these letters by Zern and the idea of adding words actually does help steampunk this little project even more than just the fussy cuts alone. Here I'm preparing another matten layer, and this time I'm going to cheat a little and use one of the clusters made in the previous video that I've shared. I will make sure the link for that video, if you haven't seen it, is in this video's description. The cluster isn't steampunk, so this is how we're going to steampunk it up. First of all, take a steampunk fussy cut that seems to work with the picture. There is no great debate going on with this design. I am simply picking up one fussy cut and adding it, because As soon as you do that, everything starts to gel together. So you don't have to overthink these collages and clusters. While the words that I'm adding here are not steampunk, king and queen, they are done in a steampunk style. So I would encourage you simply to use your kits in a much more organic way, and you will be surprised by the results. We might even do a blind tutorial. In other words, we do some cutting on the reverse so we can't even see what we're doing. Using that method often gives people faith just to have a go. I'm not going to bore you by doing a video that shows every single collage that goes on to make these pieces for the mini junk journal. You can see just from the two that I've shown you that it is simply a question of pulling bits together. I never add stitch detail to a neat journal, but when it's a grungy style, because I can't sew a straight line, and I don't even want to sew a straight line to be fair, I'm happy to add stitch detail because I want it to look messy. My only regret in buying this particular sewing machine was because it is quite cheap, it doesn't have many different stitch patterns, and I really wish I'd invested to get one with a few more messy stitches as part of its design. The other advantage of adding stitch work is that you are creating even more security with the gluing. Stitching does add as an extra binding, just don't do it until you are sure that your glue has fully dried. Because of the raised edges on this cardboard, it is a bit more difficult to glue things down. Therefore, while the glue is still wet, I'm putting over some wax paper and I will be placing a heavy book on top of the whole thing. Just to quickly show you what I've done on the reverse, I've added one piece of the printable paper and inked round all the edges, including the cardboard. So now we're going to make these reverse pieces more junk journal-like to give the project some interest. With this one, I'm simply going to add a word and leave some writing space. And again, I'm going to add a heavy weight to this to make sure it all fully adheres as it dries. With the next reverse, I'm thinking about doing a flip. So I'm scoring in that will be used to secure the flip to our journal page. To make the fold neat and tidy, I'm cutting off the corners at an angle. I'm not measuring this or making them exactly the same because they actually won't be seen. I've noticed on the reverse that I hadn't allowed for the page margin when initially cutting down my flip. Therefore, I'm adapting very quickly to add some of the printed paper and cover up that white page margin. I've cut down the flip page to fit, and now I can glue that fold in place, and as you can see, it all will flip over nicely. To cover up the fold, I have another printable that can be matte and layered on top, and now that I have the basic mechanics sorted, we can decorate. We can all make mistakes. I thought this was going to be a top flip. Actually, it ends up being a side one, which means my lettering is upside down. Therefore, my decoration may be slightly more than originally intended. And of course, a quick way to cover up my error is to use a large cluster that was made for the previous video and trim off any excess. Again, I'm just adding a small steampunk element. Because I added a border to cover up the white margin, I'm now adding extra printable over the top of that border. As you can see, it's not that I don't make mistakes, I just cover them up and make them part of the design so that anyone who hasn't viewed the video would not realise that that's what's going on. Now I'm just adding yet another steampunk fussy cut and some wording for the page that is hidden behind the flip. This time I'm choosing a more interesting looking piece to matte and layer onto that background because it is going to be seen. I've chosen an element from my general stash and I'm just making this fit the whole theme backing it to make it a bit stiffer and into a journaling card. Using a piece of my own printed paper from the previous video, I've cut it into a small rectangle and I'm making that into a pocket or a tuck spot. I've also added a steampunk element to that pocket, which will hold that little card that we've just made. I decided, as I was adding words to a lot of these pages, I better do so again. Therefore, I chose a very short word this time, fly. Here I have a long strip of paper that has been printed on both sides, which I'm going to make into a tall, narrow envelope. I'm scoring in down both vertical sides on the 1 centimetre mark, unfolding it so that we create the envelope shape. Having done that, I'm cutting away that score line from the top third and the bottom third, so that the central piece is a little bit fatter than the rest, as you can see here as I fold the top and the bottom down. On the fatter middle piece, I'm now cutting in towards the thinner pieces so that I can fold those sides in neatly along that score line. Here I'm just using my plastic card where I've cut away the corners so that I can shape the top of the envelope. And now I'm just gluing along the edges so I can pull the envelope together. That is basically the envelope now made, and there's plenty of space for a journaling card. Here I'm just measuring and cutting a scrap to fit inside the envelope easily so that I can make a steampunk worthy journaling card. Again, I'm just going to shape the top to give it an extra finishing touch. And I decide rather than add a closure, what I'm going to do is cut a slit into the envelope, so I'm protecting it with my little piece of plastic, that I can then tuck the lid or the fold into. Having done that, I then need to make some adjustments to the fold by making that bit slimmer, so that it will tuck neatly in. However, I managed to cut the slit on an angle, so I'm adding a small detail, leaving the top part free so everything can tuck behind and you can't see the dodgy angle of that slit. As I said before, I make lots of mistakes. It's just a question of thinking of a way to correct them. I'm now decorating the top of that envelope just so that every single aspect of this journal has something interesting to look at. And of course, I can't leave the journaling card plain. I want to decorate that as well. On both sides, where I may make use of some scraps. Moving on to another page, I've decided to do a corner tuck spot. So I've cut one piece of matting and layering diagonally across, and I'm simply going to glue along 2 edges. As you may have guessed by now, I'm also adding a fussy cut to that tuck spot. I have a piece of leftover from the flip page, so I'm going to make that into a journaling card, which will also give it continuity with other parts of the journal. Having strengthened the whole thing by adding some extra paper backing, I'm going to cut that out and shape it. For the final side, I'm going to cheat and simply add one of the clusters from the previous make. I used my hole punch to create 2 holes in my first page and use that as a template for the remaining pages. I did start by using my largest split rings to put it all together because I was thinking cardboard is thick, but actually I end up rethreading these onto a much smaller split ring, which I think would be 1 inch maximum, which you can see here, much smaller rings. And here's how it's looking. Here you can see our envelope and how that has been tucked into the split, and the made to measure journaling card. I will post close-up photographs of all the designs in case you missed them, because I did not show you every single one on the video. Here's our little pocket and card. I've left the back plain so you can put little notes on it. This page is the one that has our flip page on it. That does give a little bit more journaling space. Another decorated page that you can see properly in the photographs, and the corner tuck spot. The final page is more highly decorated pages. So as you can see, this is more of an artistic style journal than one for practical uses. I hope you found that short tutorial useful, and I will catch you with our main journal very, very soon.